Well, hey, and welcome to Parish and Pub. I'm Steven, and have you noticed how ugly everything is? Like, just being out and about among the things that humans have built and made in the last 50 years or so, it's clear that beauty wasn't high on the priority list, if it was considered at all. And, where aesthetics were a consideration, including a lot of the art that's been produced over the last century or so, it's become totally disconnected from the long history of the traditions of beauty that once, held sway for a long time. And I think intentionally so. I think the aesthetics now prefer to be novel and increasingly self-referential or ironic or protesting something or just nihilistic. Our buildings, our architecture, our public spaces, our music and our visual arts, it's cheaper, more flimsy, more mass-produced, has less character, is less rooted in place or community. It's more vulgar. In a word, it's just uglier. In America, this is doubly true, since we're such a young country and don't have the benefit of these century-old works of architectural art dotting our cities and landscapes like Europe does. And, the timing, unfortunately, of our great building projects in the US also happened to coincide with this growing cultural preference for efficiency and profit over other considerations. And as I expounded in my last video, the wide abandonment of any admission of the transcendental or of an immanent God for the reign of the secular and our more material wants and desires. But even in Europe, these same ideas came to reign, and all those old churches and cathedrals standing around, those old fossilized exoskeletons of debunked superstitions are now used only in the most desperate of times or for the most persistent of our human solemnities. But, at least they're still standing in Europe, these sentinels of a bygone epoch, reminders of how the transcendent once filled us with such energy and creativity as a people. As David Bentley Hart puts it, it is hard not to lament the loss of cultural creativity that seems an inevitable concomitant of this new secular beatitude. When one looks, for instance, at the crepuscular wasteland of modern Europe with its aging millions milling around the glorious remnants of an artistic and architectural legacy that no modern people could hope to rival, acting out the hideously prolonged satyr play at the end of the tragic cycle of European history, it is hard to suppress a feeling of morbid despair. This was Nietzsche's greatest fear, the loss of any transcendent aspiration that could coax mighty works of cultural imagination out of a people. In a wonderful article entitled Forming the Soul, the monastic community of the Sisters of St. Xenia Sketi write, "We have not inherited Western culture at all. That is precisely our trouble. We have simply grown up on the degenerate and decaying vestiges of that culture. We live not in the West, but on the fading memory of the West. Our present culture is an absence of culture, a vacuum that has left our souls shrunken and our spirits stifled." But while they're clear-eyed about the problem, they are also optimistic in typical monastic fashion of the power of God to elevate, rescue, and heal every human condition. Before plunging into the higher spiritual things for that healing, though, they insist, today's man must first feed his soul, for its malnutrition will not permit any profound growth of spirit. Modern Western man is like a plant with the shallowest possible roots, and he naturally cannot support any great growth. His spirit is no longer capable of soaring because a lofty spirit must rise out of a deep soul, which has the maturity, the sensitivity to feel noble things and become ennobled by them. So how do we flattened modern Western people feed our souls in order to eventually grow our spirits? We have to go back. We have to re-examine and rediscover what was in all those old works of art, what was behind them, what motivated them, what they meant, especially to the people making them. We have to return to what was built and composed before the transcendent was jettisoned for the pragmatic. As C.S. Lewis said, I think if you look at the present state of the world, it's pretty plain that humanity has been making some big mistakes. We're on the wrong road. And if that is so, we must go back. Going back is the quickest way on. And so, to describe how to go back in order to finally go on, I leave you with the words of the Sisters of St. Xenia. By contemplating the noble and beautiful as portrayed in these older arts, we can regain an awareness of that tenderness of heart, that community of sympathy, that faculty for nobility and purity given us by God and darkened by our long neglect. Spiritual growth follows most truly on this elevation and purification of the first stratum of the soul. Without this, it is difficult to obtain sobriety, fruitfulness, authenticity, depth in our spiritual lives. An uncultivated soul seldom has the discernment and balance to see clearly and honestly, nor the sensitivity to feel deeply, nor the intensity to strive wholeheartedly, nor the idealism to reach uncompromisingly for what is truest and best. If we refuse to nourish ourselves on what is edifying and elevating, we will inevitably be fed by what is not, as the popular culture of America in all its shallowness and falseness seeps into our unguarded hearts daily. If we do not counteract it, if we fail to set the loftiest things before us, we will inevitably let our souls remain choked with artificiality and cheapness. We will remain mired in the fatal shoddiness of our world and ourselves, and we shall not be able to touch the depths of our own hearts, nor to answer the need of our neighbors. It is quite true that the study of poetry, art, history, fiction is indeed a most rudimentary one. It is indeed not a spiritual study, but we in our modern condition are in dire need of the rudiments, not only of spiritual life, but of humanity. The Apostle Paul warns us not to mistake the lower life of the soul for the higher life of the spirit, and warns us not to turn back from the fullness of Christ to the emptiness of the world, but he does not tell us to ignore the development of the soul altogether. And so, wherever the church went in Europe, whether in Ireland or in Gaul or Britain or in Spain, she preserved all that was good and true in a people's art and literature, nature and society. The pagan culture of pre-Christian Europe thus found in Christ the fulfillment of its highest longings, and Europe flowered. For generations thence, men and women poured out their deepest aspirations in building, singing, making, and living. They rejoiced in God, in the wonder of his works and world, and the legacy they left us sings of their joy. They built an age whose wonder and beauty we have nearly forgotten, where poetry ran quick in the blood, and chastity was not shamefaced but valiant, where mockery and baseness were not a sign of strength, and tears were not a sign of weakness, a world of gentleness and courtesy, of honor and acuity, of nobility and integrity. It was once our world too. We did not always wander dejectedly in the wasteland of neon and soap operas. We once knew their exaltation, their nobility, their joy. If we fail to see this, we lose all hope of ever seeing ourselves. If we look at the jewel-like clarity of the medieval mind, with its profoundly beautiful and humbling vision of the cosmos as a great court dance, and see only Anselm's proofs and papal aggrandizement, we make the saddest possible comment on the numbness of our own hearts. The medieval man looked at the night sky and wept, feeling himself enclosed in the double darkness of his physical and moral separation from God, but he also believed that the stars were holes in the floor of heaven. The light was streaming in from that world of endless day where all things danced in the delight of creatureliness and were radiant in the changeless light of God. He treasured hierarchy because it was for him a reminder of God. His whole world was an endlessly unfolding, interlocking allegory of the majesty and love of God. He rejoiced in the delight of obedience and walked fearfully in the humility of command, because both were images of profound spiritual realities. He reveled in the color and beauty of the physical world because they were foreshadowings of the even greater splendors of the kingdom of God. He could spend his entire adult life building a cathedral and never forget the transience of the temporal world. His literature, didactic and moral, reminded him of the beauty of virtue and nobility, and the brevity of life. His poetry sang of his delight in the created world and his awe of God. His society taught him to feel the reality and proximity of the spiritual realm almost more intensely than the physical. His churches, resplendent, delicate, glowing, lifted his soul on traceries of stone and set his spirits on the heights. The apostolic impetus carried that world for almost 1,000 years. That impetus remained largely intact until the Enlightenment, was eroded greatly during the Romantic Age, and finally crumbled entirely in our own time. The best that was done in this spirit, springs from this world. The community of feeling and intent which marks the best of our writers, artists, musicians, springs from this source. Regardless of social, political, or religious changes, Shakespeare and Dickens, Bach and Mozart, Donne and Hugo share the same world, and it is to this world that we today must look for the formation of our souls. There are lessons we must learn from our own past before we can possibly hope to go on. We must recover the feelings and sensitivities which were once the common property of all civilized people. Those works of art, of literature, of music, which are pre-modern, are of essential value to us. They can teach us, as will nothing we ourselves now produce, what nobility is, what virtue is, what honor and purity are, what sacrifice and loyalty are, what is worthy and what is not. Poetry, music, art, fiction are not spiritual food, but are rather the milk and bread we need to strengthen ourselves to live on the meat of the Spirit. We have almost forgotten the sight and sound and feel of the sublime. To regain it, we must return to a time when the gray, gritty moral fog had not yet settled over the world, a time when men's sight was still clear and their souls still keen. If we cannot manage the uplands of the soul, we shall hardly be able to touch the peaks of the Spirit. Hardened by the din and moral cacophony of our world, our hearts are cold and our consciences numb. We are little moved by pity, honor, nobility, purity, because we seldom or never see them. We are even little moved by beauty because we hardly know what it is. Like most value terms, beauty has become almost contentless, a word empty of any absolute meaning. Beauty is now whatever we like, or whatever someone tells us is beautiful. Art is whatever someone chooses to call art. There are ostensibly no longer any valid reasons for refusing to admit that a pile of rusty hubcaps and bent pipe is art in the same way that Rembrandt is art. Artistic taste has only very recently become entirely personal. Beauty, like all other aspects of art, was once an aspect of absolute truth, which was God. Therefore, a thing was beautiful in proportion to its faithfulness in reflecting some part of the image and truth of God. Now, having lost the concept of truth, we no longer have a concept of beauty, and feed on mediocrity, on ugliness, on anti-beauty, anti-heroes, anti-art, the mockery of God and man. We must learn again what beauty is. We must learn what it is to be carried on the thunder of a fugue, to be engulfed in the madness of Lear, to be consumed with the sanity of Quixote. We need to be refreshed by the health and charity of Dickens, illumined by the clarity and perception of Hugo, ballasted by the sober gravity and sidelong wit of Johnson, touched by the fire of Donne, soothed by Chaucer's flowering springtime. We must feel again that pang of homesickness, that bittersweet joy at almost touching, yet never grasping, almost hearing, yet never catching, him whose beauty makes art beautiful. In its truest, deepest sense, this is what art does. That it cannot quench is why we need it. It continually whets a thirst. It continually reminds us of a hunger it cannot satisfy. It leads us up to the very highest reaches of human experience, and then leaves us still homesick, still longing for we know not what. And at that point, our spirit is enabled to go on, to find its true home in God. A soul that is unformed, uncultivated, will neither feel the true depth and pain of its homesickness, nor know how to remedy it. In order to be thirsty enough, hungry enough to seek God diligently and uncompromisingly, we must form our souls carefully and continuously.